About 1 in 3 driving tests has the emergency stop, although in my experience it's far less than 1 in 3. Now don't worry, your driving examiner isn't going to suddenly spring the emergency stop upon you when you're driving down some random road in what hopefully is a nice relaxing driving test. No, first of all they'll get you to pull over at the side of the road, and then they'll brief you that you're about to do the emergency stop and pre-warn you that it will be on this road soon. They will explain to you that before they want you to do the emergency stop, they'll put their hand out and say, stop! Don't do the emergency stop unless they put their hand out and say stop. If before you have a chance to do the emergency stop, someone catches up behind you, they will cancel the emergency stop and they will tell you that you no longer have to do one. And that if they want you to do one later on in the driving test, they will give you another briefing at the side of the road to pre-warn you that it's about to happen. You should not check your mirrors during the emergency stop, as your examiner will make sure it's safe for you. This is because you would not have time to check your mirrors in a real emergency. So how do you do the emergency stop? Well, it's not that simple because it does depend on what kind of car you have. In a car with ABS, you will do it differently to a car without ABS. ABS stands for anti-lock braking system. Mercedes was the first manufacturer to fit it to a production car back in 1978, which is before I was born. And it has been compulsory in the EU since 2004, which is actually when I passed my driving test. It's very important when you panic brake, which is the kind of braking you're likely to do in a real emergency, because when you panic brake, you're going to brake very hard. And when you brake very hard, you are likely to skid. You're likely to stop your wheels suddenly when the car is still moving, and the car will be skidding. Now, the problem with skidding is you actually lose your steering. So if you're braking hard and skidding and you try to turn the wheel, you don't turn. You keep going in a straight line. So ABS prevents your wheels from skidding, which enables you to still steer, which is really helpful in letting you steer around any objects that you might have possibly hit. To know if your car has ABS, simply turn the ignition on and you should see the light ABS illuminate on your dashboard. If there is no light, that means your car does not have ABS. If the light goes out, such as it did on this car, that means the ABS is fine. If the light stays on, that means there's a problem with your ABS and you need to take it to a garage to get it sorted. If your ABS light is on, that is a MOT failure, which in the UK is the safety standard that your car needs to meet each year. In a car with ABS, all you need to do during the emergency stop is brake and clutch down together as hard as you can, and the ABS module, or the computer, the ABS brain, will take over the modulation of the braking and make sure you stop as quickly as possible without skidding. You don't have to modulate the brake yourself. In fact, you shouldn't, because that will stop the system from working. You should just keep your pedal pressed as hard as you can throughout the entire stop. Here is an example of an emergency stop with ABS. You can see the front wheels barely skid at all as the ABS module keeps skidding to a minimum. When the ABS activates, you'll actually hear it. It will sound a bit like a coffee grinder, kind of a bit lower pitch than that, something like that. But don't worry, it's just the ABS doing its job. You'll also feel the brake pedal pulsating up and down rapidly. Again, don't come off the brake pedal, don't let it scare you, just keep your foot hard on the brake and the ABS module will modulate the brakes for you and get you stopped. But if you have a car without ABS, you're going to have to do the braking modulation yourself. Now, what I mean by braking modulation is braking as hard as you can without skidding. And when you sense the car is skidding, you'll actually have to release the brake a little bit. That's the modulation part. It's releasing the brake and then reapplying it to keep yourself on what is known as the threshold of skidding. So you're braking as hard as you can without actually skidding. Here is an example of an emergency stop without ABS. You can see on 2 occasions the front wheel sliding along the road. On both occasions I had to release the brake slightly to prevent the skid. You can tell the car is skidding because the steering will normally get a little bit lighter and just feel a bit funny, and you'll hear some screeching sound from the tyres, especially in warm weather. The problem is that how hard you can brake changes every day and depends on what car you're driving as well. So it's dependent on the temperature outside, whether it's wet. It can take twice as long to stop in the wet as it does in the dry. The temperature of the road, the temperature of your tyres, the temperature of your brakes, whether the engine is in the front of the car, the middle of the car, or the rear, and it goes on and on. There's loads of things that can affect how long it's going to take you to stop a car and how hard you can brake. Which is why ABS is so brilliant, because you can just press that pedal as hard as you can and then the computer can figure that out for you. So to find out how hard you can brake, you need to go beyond the limit to find the limit. So you'll brake very hard until you feel it skid, and now you know for that day and those conditions how hard you needed to brake before it started to skid. And then you just have to try and keep it on that threshold of where it's just about to skid but not quite, to ensure you're stopping as quickly as you can and maintaining your steering to steer around any objects you're trying to avoid. Another thing to note about stopping without ABS is that you shouldn't press the clutch down immediately. Try to avoid pressing the clutch down until the very end of the stop. That will help you with the initial part of the braking, especially downhill. However, if you stall during the emergency stop because you forget to press the clutch down, don't worry, it is not necessarily a fail. As long as you keep the car safe and restart the car safely, you should be fine. During the emergency stop, you need to keep the car in a straight line. And sometimes during the stop, particularly when it's wet, the car can start to slide to the right. So if you start sliding right, try and turn left to get the car back on track and straight. And if you're sliding left, try and turn right to try and get the car going where you want it to go. In either case, make sure you always steer where you want to go. The highway code states that you should steer into the skid. Now, about 50% of my customers take this the wrong way and think it means you should steer in the same way that the car is sliding, which will make things a lot worse. You don't want to do that. It's just the way it's worded. But I like to think of it as steer against the skid. Once you have finished the emergency stop, make sure you pull the handbrake up before you come off the foot brake, and you select neutral before you come off the clutch to ensure you don't shoot forwards and that you stay stopped. Before you move away again, the driving examiners will be expecting you to check both your left and your right blind spot before moving on. And although when you're moving away from the left side of the road, normally you only have to check your right blind spot because you're going more to the right, you're not actually driving to the left and you're already next to the curb. After the emergency stop, you're actually going to be stopped somewhere in the middle of your lane, and that means there's a lot more space on your left for cyclists or pedestrians to be coming up alongside you on the road. That's all for this one. Please comment for what videos you want to see in the future, and please subscribe to get those future videos.